The lobby was spinning, the noise dissolving into a distant hum, and her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. Emily Ross didn't plan for any of this, not the fear, not the desperation, and certainly not the moment she grabbed the sleeve of a well-dressed stranger and whispered the most reckless request of her life. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know where he came from. She only knew one thing: she needed help, and she needed it now. She had no idea the man she clung to, the one she begged to pretend to be her husband, was the very person whose signature appeared on every paycheck at her workplace, the CEO she had never met, the quiet force behind the company she was struggling to survive in. Backhand index pointing right before we continue: if you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Everyday Heroes. Your support truly keeps these stories alive. Emily's life had always been a storm she tried to outrun. Her father's illness, the crushing medical bills, the overtime shifts that left her exhausted, it all blended into an ache she carried quietly. Today's storm, however, was different. Today, she had to face the man who broke her family years ago, the one who abandoned them and now suddenly reappeared demanding money she didn't have. He claimed he had changed. He claimed he wanted to be part of her life again. But Emily had seen enough betrayal to know better. She only needed to make him believe she wasn't alone, that she had built a stable, protected life, one he couldn't shake with his chaos. That's why she panicked. That's why she reached for the stranger. The man she grabbed stood tall, dressed in a deep navy suit that seemed too crisp for someone simply passing by. His unexpected gentleness steadied her trembling, and when she begged him with her eyes to just go along with her plan, he nodded once without hesitation. Together, they walked toward the man who called himself her father, and suddenly her lie blossomed into a shield she desperately needed. The stranger didn't overact or speak too much. He simply stood close, protective, calm, as though he had known her for years. Her father's expression shifted. The intimidation he had walked in with faded, replaced by something else: uncertainty, maybe even defeat. And after a few tense minutes, he left, muttering frustration, realizing Emily was no longer the vulnerable girl he could manipulate. When it was over, Emily finally breathed again. But the stranger didn't walk away like she expected. Instead, he waited, watching her with a quiet concern that surprised her. She thanked him, embarrassed, apologizing for dragging him into her chaos. He simply told her it was all right, that everyone needs help sometimes, and then he left as quietly as he had arrived. She thought she would never see him again. But life has a way of turning ordinary moments into extraordinary crossings. The next morning, Emily walked into her office with her usual heaviness, preparing for another long day of numbers, paperwork, and silent hope that she wouldn't fall apart. The company had recently announced a change in leadership. Rumors said the new CEO was young, private, and unpredictable. Emily only hoped he would keep the place running long enough for her to gather herself. As employees gathered for the welcome meeting, Emily stood in the back, unnoticed, her mind still replaying yesterday's chaotic encounter. Then the new CEO stepped on the stage. Her breath froze. Her hands went cold. It was him. The stranger. The one who had pretended to be her husband. The one she had begged in a moment of chaos. He scanned the room professionally, and although his expression remained composed, she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes when they met hers. Emily felt her knees weaken. She didn't know whether to run, hide, or apologize again. She prayed he would not expose her or make the situation awkward. Days turned into weeks, and while he never brought up that moment, she noticed something strange. He would pause when passing her desk, sometimes asking if she was managing her workload, sometimes offering small tips that helped her navigate the pressures of the job. Her colleagues whispered that the new CEO was distant, formal, unreadable. But Emily saw something different: kindness hidden beneath restraint, a calm strength that made her feel safe without fully understanding why. One evening, when the office had emptied and the long hours had drained the world into silence, Emily found herself struggling with a task that seemed impossible. She sat alone, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders, when she heard footsteps behind her. He approached slowly, offering help without judgment. As they worked together, something shifted, something soft, something healing. Emily suddenly realized how long it had been since someone stood beside her simply because they cared. In that quiet moment, she confessed what she had been carrying: her father's history, the fear, the exhaustion, the guilt of dragging him into her personal disaster. She expected disappointment. Instead, he listened with sincerity she had never experienced. He told her that the moment she reached for him, he saw someone brave, someone fighting for her life with every breath. He told her she wasn't a burden, just human. And humans deserve help. Before she could thank him, he surprised her with a confession of his own. That day in the lobby, he hadn't stepped in because he felt obligated. He stepped in because, in her frightened eyes, he saw something he hadn't felt in years, a spark of trust. Something he didn't take lightly. Over time, their connection deepened, not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent moments where life softened just enough to let love grow. She learned his name, his dreams, his vulnerabilities. He learned her courage, her resilience, and the quiet strength behind every sacrifice she made. Their bond became something neither had expected, but both silently needed. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Everyday Heroes. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories to life. Speech balloon special request, comment below, I believe in unexpected kindness. And so, what began as a desperate plea to a stranger became the beginning of a love story built not on perfection, but on understanding, compassion, and two souls finding refuge in each other's presence, at the very moment they needed it most.